The wrench slipped, and coolant splashed across Arlo's face like warm spit that he cursed, wiped his eyes with a rag that was dirtier than the fluid, and rolled out from under the cargo hauler on his back. The twin suns of Dust Haven were already climbing, turning the sky the color of a bruise. Another hot day on a planet that nobody remembered existed. "You look beautiful," Brannick said from the supply depot doorway, holding 2 cups of something that was technically called coffee but tasted like engine grease filtered through sand. Coupling rod snapped again, Arlo said, sitting up. "Third time this month. So welded. I welded it twice already. It needs replacing." Brannick whistled low. "Replacing costs money. Money requires customers. Customers require a planet people actually want to visit." He handed Arlo a cup. "We are on Dust Haven. Nobody wants to visit Dust Haven." Arlo drank. The coffee was terrible. He drank more. Dust Haven was a fringe colony with a population of 412 people who stayed because they had nowhere better to go. The spaceport had 6 landing pads, and 3 of them had cracks wide enough to lose a boot in. Arlo ran the only repair shop within 9 systems, which sounded impressive until you realized that the 9 surrounding systems were also empty. He was 34 years old. He had once been a certified starship engineer for the Orion trade fleet, maintaining vessels that carried goods between the core worlds. Good pay, clean uniforms. Then he spent 3 years watching corporate inspectors sign off on ships he knew were unsafe, and one of those ships broke apart over a colony moon and killed 200 people. Arlo quit the next morning, took his tools, and disappeared to the edge of the galaxy, where nobody asked questions and every machine was honest about being broken. He was about to crawl back under the hauler when the sound hit. Not an explosion, not a roar, more like a long, deep groan, as if something enormous was trying very hard not to scream. Arlo looked up and saw a ship dropping through the atmosphere at a steep angle, trailing a thin ribbon of smoke that shifted between silver and violet. "Pad 7, Brannick said, already moving." They ran. The ship came down hard but controlled, like a wounded bird that still remembered how to land. It hit Pad 7 with a grinding shriek and slid 20 meters before stopping. Dust clouds rose and swallowed the spaceport. When the dust settled, Arlo saw the ship clearly for the first time and stopped walking. It was wrong. Not damaged wrong. Impossible wrong. The hull seemed to be made of metal, but it shifted color as he watched, cycling through shades of dark silver and deep blue like the skin of something alive. The shape was sleek, almost organic, with curves that didn't follow any design language Arlo recognized. It looked ancient and impossibly advanced at the same time, like finding a computer chip buried inside a fossil. The hatch opened with a sound like a slow breath. She stepped out, tall, silver-skinned, like polished moonlight stretched over bone. Her eyes were deep violet, almost black, and they carried a weight that Arlo couldn't explain. She moved carefully, one hand pressed against her left arm, where a long gash ran from her elbow to her wrist. The wound glowed faintly blue. She looked at Arlo, then at the repair shop behind him, then back at Arlo. "Can you fix a ship?" she asked. Her voice was calm and clear, as if crashing onto a forgotten colony world was something that happened to her regularly. "Depends on the ship," Arlo said. "That one." She nodded toward the vessel behind her. Arlo looked at the alien craft. Every instinct told him this was above his skill level by a factor of about 10,000. The technology was beyond anything in his experience. He didn't even know what the hull was made of, but the ship was broken, and broken things were his business. "I could take a look," he said. "Might need to patch that arm first, though." She glanced down at her wound as if she had forgotten about it. "It will heal. Still, infections are real, even for whatever species you are. Come inside." Ihe Mikheed. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or something older than surprise. "My name is Cien," she said. "Arlo." The loud one behind me is Brannick. "Charmed," Brannick said, though his voice was tight. He pulled Arlo aside while Cien waited. "That ship doesn't match anything. I ran a visual scan. No species on file. No design origin. Nothing. So she's from somewhere new. Somewhere new doesn't cover it. That ship shouldn't exist." Arlo shrugged. "She needs help. I fix things. That's the whole equation." He led Cien inside, cleaned her wound, and wrapped it with simple gauze. She watched his hands the entire time with an expression he couldn't read. Afterward, he walked to the ship. Up close, the hull radiated a faint warmth, like standing near a sleeping animal. He reached out and placed his palm flat against the surface. Every light on the landing strip flickered. The overhead floods, the runway markers, the emergency beacons on the depot roof. All of them blinked once, together, like the entire spaceport had taken a breath. Arlo pulled his hand back. Behind him, Cien stood perfectly still. Her violet eyes were wide. She said nothing, but her hands were trembling at her sides. Arlo didn't notice. He was already walking around the ship, looking for access panels, muttering about hull integrity and thermal scoring. He had no idea what he had just touched, and Cien, who had built the pathways between every star in the known universe, was not ready to tell him. 3 bolts held the first access panel in place. Arlo removed them carefully, set them in a line on the ground the way he always did, and pulled the panel free. What he found inside made no sense. There were no wires, no circuit boards, no fuel lines, no coolant tubes, no relay switches. Instead, the interior of the ship was filled with thin strands of light, woven together like the roots of a tree. They pulsed gently, some bright, some dim, and a few completely dark. Where the dark strands met, the surrounding ones flickered and strained, as if trying to carry a load that was too heavy. Arlo sat back on his heels and stared. He had repaired fusion cores on deep space freighters. He had rebuilt navigation arrays using nothing but scrap copper and patience. He had once fixed a military gunship's targeting system with a fork. But this was something else entirely. This was technology that didn't follow any rule he had ever learned. He did what he always did when a machine confused him. He talked to it. "All right," he said quietly, leaning into the open panel. "Show me where it hurts." He reached in and gently touched one of the dark strands. It was warm, almost hot, and when his fingers made contact, the surrounding strands brightened slightly. He moved his hand along the strand, feeling for breaks, for weak points, the same way he would run his fingers along a cracked fuel line. He found it. A section where the strand had been severed cleanly, as if cut by something precise and deliberate. Not wear and tear. Not age. This was a wound. "Someone did this to you on purpose," he murmured from across the landing pad. Cien watched him. She sat on an overturned crate with her injured arm resting on her knee, and she had not moved in over an hour. Her violet eyes tracked every movement Arlo made. Brannick brought her water. She thanked him politely, but didn't drink it. "He always talks to the machines," Brannick said, sitting down beside her. "Been doing it since I met him. Thinks they can hear him." "Can they?" Cien asked. Brannick laughed. "Probably not. But the weird thing is, his repairs last longer than anyone else's. Ships he fixes don't break down again for years. So maybe the machines are listening after all." Cien said nothing. She watched Arlo lean deeper into the panel, narrating his every move in a low, steady voice. By midday, Arlo had mapped the damage. 7 severed strands, all in the same section, all cut with the same precision. The ship's navigation system, whatever it was, had been deliberately crippled. Someone had wanted this vessel unable to move, that he came to Cien with his findings. "Your ship was attacked," he said. "The damage isn't random. Someone targeted your navigation. They wanted to ground you." "Yes," Cien said simply. "You don't seem surprised." "I am not." Arlo waited for more. It didn't come. He rubbed the back of his neck and decided to let it go for now. He had a job to do. He worked through the afternoon. The strands of light wouldn't respond to any tool he had. Soldering did nothing. Welding was useless. Bonding agents slid right off. Whatever this material was, it rejected every mechanical solution Arlo tried. So he tried something different. He took 2 severed ends of strand and held them together with his bare hands. He pressed them firmly, the way he would hold the edges of a torn page together, and he waited. He hummed a little, an old song his mother used to sing when she was mending clothes. The strand reconnected. Arlo blinked. He let go carefully. The strand held. It pulsed with light, dim at first, then stronger, until it matched the brightness of the ones around it. What did you just do? Cien was standing right behind him. He hadn't heard her approach. I just held it together, Arlo said. I don't know why it worked. It worked because you meant it, she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. That evening, they sat outside the ship and shared a meal. Brannick had brought ration packs, and Arlo heated them on a portable stove. The food was nothing special, but Cien ate as if she hadn't had a proper meal in a long time. How long have you been traveling? Arlo asked. A very long time, she said. Alone? Yes. That sounds exhausting. She looked at him with those ancient violet eyes. What do humans value most? She asked. The question came out of nowhere. Arlo chewed his food and thought about it seriously. He thought about his years on the fleet, watching good ships fall apart because nobody cared enough to maintain them. He thought about Dust Haven, where everything was broken and everyone kept going anyway. Fixing things that other people gave up on, he said. Cien set down her food. She looked at the ship, then at the stars beginning to appear above the desert, then back at Arlo. You are a strange species, she said. We get that a lot. Later that night, Arlo went back to the ship to check on his repair. The reconnected strand was holding perfectly. Encouraged, he opened a deeper panel to plan the next day's work. Inside, he found a crack in the hull. Not an exterior crack, but an internal one, hidden beneath layers of the strange, living material. Through the crack, he saw something impossible. Stars, not a screen. Not a projection. Not a hologram. Actual stars, burning in actual void, as if the inside of the ship contained a piece of the universe itself. He could feel the cold of space on his face, smell something ancient and vast, hear a hum that vibrated in his chest like a second heartbeat. Arlo pulled back slowly. His hands were shaking that he looked toward the crate where Cien slept. He had a lot of questions. But for the first time in his life, Arlo Finch was not sure he wanted the answers. Arlo didn't sleep that night. He sat on the edge of landing pad 7 with his boots hanging over the cracked concrete, staring at the ship. The twin moons of Dust Haven hung low, painting the desert in pale silver. The ship's hull shifted colors in the moonlight, slow and rhythmic, like something breathing in its sleep. Stars. There had been actual stars inside the hull. He waited until sunrise. Then he went to find Cien. She was sitting on the sand dune behind the spaceport, facing east, watching the twin suns rise as if she had been doing it for 1,000 mornings. Maybe she had. Arlo was starting to suspect that nothing about this woman was ordinary. I need to ask you something, he said. I know. Last night, I found a crack inside the ship. Through it, I saw stars. Real stars. Not a display. Not a map. Actual space. He paused. What is your ship? Cien didn't look at him. It is what it appears to be. A vessel. Vessels don't contain pieces of the universe inside their walls. Mine does. That's not an answer. It is the only answer I can give you right now. She finally turned to face him. The violet in her eyes was deeper in the morning light, almost black. I need you to trust me, Arlo. Can you do that? Everything in his training said no. Every rule of engineering, every principle of working on unknown systems told him to stop, walk away, and report this to someone with more authority. But Arlo had spent the last 6 years on a planet where authority was a joke, and the only thing that mattered was whether you showed up to do the work. I can trust you, he said. But if something in that ship is dangerous, I need to know before it hurts someone. The ship will not hurt anyone, Cien said. I promise you that. He believed her. He went back to work. By midday, he had repaired 4 of the 7 severed strands. Each one required the same method. Bare hands, steady pressure, and patience. No tool worked. Only direct human contact. Arlo didn't understand why, but he accepted it the way he accepted all the strange things machines did when you treated them with care. As he worked deeper into the ship, he found more evidence of the attack. Scorch marks on the inner hull, burned in precise geometric patterns. Energy weapon fire, but not the kind used by pirates or raiders. This was surgical, military, someone with advanced technology and a very specific target. He told Cien what he found. She nodded as if she already knew. Who did this to you? He asked. They call themselves the Pale Council. Never heard of them? You wouldn't have. They operate beyond the fringe, beyond the places your species has mapped. They are very old and very powerful, and they have been looking for me for a very long time. Arlo leaned against the ship. What do they want? What I carry? Which is... She hesitated. Then she shook her head. Please, just finish the repairs. That afternoon, Brannick came running from the supply depot with his face white. He grabbed Arlo's arm and pulled him inside. I've been monitoring the deep space bands, Brannick said. There's traffic. Heavy traffic. At least 6 unidentified vessels moving toward this system on a converging course. Traitors? No. Their signals are encrypted beyond anything I've ever seen. Military grade. Maybe beyond military grade. And Arlo, they're fast. They'll be in range within 2 days. Arlo's stomach tightened. She said someone was looking for her. Someone? Try an entire fleet. Brannick ran his hands through his hair. We have 400 people on this colony. No weapons. No shields. Not even a proper communication array to call for help. If those ships are hostile, we're done. Arlo found Cien by the ship. He told her about the approaching vessels. Her reaction confirmed everything. She closed her eyes. Her silver skin seemed to pale, if that was even possible. When she opened her eyes again, the weight in them was heavier than before. I should leave now, she said. If I go, they will follow me. They have no interest in Dusthaven. Your ship isn't fixed. It can fly. Barely. But it can fly. Barely isn't good enough. If they catch you in a half-repaired ship, what happens? Cien didn't answer. She didn't need to. Then we finished the job, Arlo said. I work faster when there's a deadline. He went back to the ship and worked harder than he had ever worked in his life. The 5th strand reconnected easily. The 6th fought him, resisting his touch as if the damage had cut too deep. He held the severed ends together for 20 minutes, talking softly, telling the ship it was going to be okay, telling it he was right here and he wasn't leaving. The strand reconnected. As the night fell, something changed. The ship's lights, which had been dim and erratic since Cien arrived, began to brighten. Not all at once, but steadily, like a house coming alive as someone walks through it turning on lamps. When Arlo entered the cockpit, the temperature adjusted to match his body perfectly. A panel opened before he reached for it. A seat shifted to fit his shape. The ship knew him. Cien stood in the hatchway, watching. Her hands were trembling again. It has been thousands of years since the ship accepted anyone other than me, she said quietly. Arlo looked up from the panel. Is that a good thing? Cien's voice cracked, just barely, just enough for Arlo to hear. I don't know yet. Outside, the stars burned in a sky that felt suddenly smaller. Somewhere in that darkness, the Pale Council was coming. And on a forgotten colony world, a mechanic with dirty hands and a kind voice was the only thing standing between them and whatever Cien was hiding. The ship was the size of a small moon. IT dropped out of hyperspace above Dusthaven with a sound that rattled every window in the colony. People ran outside, looked up, and went silent. The vessel hung in the sky like a dark cloud with edges too sharp to be natural, blocking one of the twin suns and casting a shadow over the spaceport that felt like a hand pressing down on the world. Then the message came. Every speaker, every communicator, every screen on Dusthaven crackled to life at the same time. The voice was calm and cold and spoke with the patience of something that had never once been told no. Surrender the architect. You have one rotation. Nobody on Dusthaven knew what the architect was. Brannick checked every database he could access. Nothing. The colonists gathered in the depot, frightened and confused, asking questions nobody could answer. But Arlo knew. He walked straight to the ship on Pad 7, where Cien was already standing with her back to him, staring up at the shadow in the sky. The architect, he said. That's you. She didn't turn around. Yes. What does that mean? And then she told him. She told him that she had built the pathways between the stars. Every jump gate that connected one system to another. Every trade corridor that allowed ships to cross the galaxy in weeks instead of centuries. Every orbital station, every navigation beacon, every safe harbor in the void. All of it was her design. She had woven the infrastructure of the cosmos the way Arlo wove wires through an engine block, except her work spanned 10,000 years and 100 billion stars. She was the sovereign architect, the only one of her kind, and the Pale Council, which was a collective of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, wanted her ability for themselves. With her power, they could shut down trade routes, isolate entire species, starve worlds, and reshape the map of civilization with themselves at its center. Arlo listened. He didn't interrupt. When she finished, the silence between them was heavy enough to feel. "I have to leave," Cien said. "If I surrender myself, they will spare Dust Haven. They have no reason to harm this colony. They only want me." "No," Arlo said. "You don't understand what they are. I understand that you came to me for help. I haven't finished the job. Arlo, this is not a repair job. This is a war, and you are one man with a wrench. One man with a wrench is exactly what fixed your ship." He turned and walked toward the depot. "Brannick, we need to talk." Within an hour, Arlo had gathered every able-bodied person in the colony who was willing to fight. That was 23 people, including Brannick, 2 retired freight pilots, a woman named Duna, who had once been a demolitions expert in the colonial militia, and a teenager named Riv who was terrified but refused to hide. They couldn't fight a fleet. Arlo knew that, but they could buy time. He knew Dust Haven better than anyone alive. Every broken landing pad, every cracked wall, every buried fuel tank, every piece of salvage that had been rusting in the desert for decades. He knew which corridors of the spaceport funneled into choke points. He knew where the ground was soft enough to swallow a heavy vehicle and where the rocks were dense enough to block a scanner. They went to work. Duna rigged fuel tanks as improvised explosives at the spaceport perimeter. Brannick built signal jammers from salvaged communication arrays. The freight pilots parked their old ships at strategic angles to create barriers and false targets. Arlo wired everything together, connecting the traps to a central trigger he could operate from the ship. That IT was crude. It was desperate. It was the most human thing any of them had ever done. While they prepared the defenses, Arlo returned to the ship for the final repair. The 7th strand, the last one, the deepest cut. He opened the innermost panel and found it, dark and cold, severed so completely that the 2 ends had pulled apart by nearly a foot. He reached in with both hands and brought the ends together. The strand resisted. It was cold against his skin, almost painful, and it pushed back against his grip as if the damage had been too great to mend. As Arlo talked, he told the ship about Earth. He had never been there himself, born on a colony world 2 generations removed, but his grandmother had told him stories. He talked about oceans so wide you could sail for weeks without seeing land, about thunderstorms that turned the sky white and made the ground shake, about forests that grew so thick the sunlight never reached the floor, about the sound of rain hitting hot pavement in summer, a smell so clean and alive that people had a word for it. Petrichor. The strand warmed under his hands. It softened. The 2 ends reached for each other like something remembering what it had been. The 7th strand reconnected. The ship's core ignited. Not a gentle start. Not a slow warm-up. The core erupted with light so pure and white that it flooded through every panel, every crack, every seam in the hull. The ship blazed like a star being born. The light was visible from the colony, from the desert, from orbit. Brannick shielded his eyes. Duna grabbed her children. Riv dropped his wrench and stared at in orbit. The Pale Council's flagship came to a full stop. They recognized that light. They had spent centuries hunting it, and now was awake. On landing pad 7, Arlo stood inside the ship with his hands still warm, and Cien looked at him as if she was seeing something she hadn't seen in 10,000 years. "What did you do?" she whispered. "I just fixed it," he said. "That's all I know how to do." They came down like falling knives. Point 12 dropships broke from the Pale Council's flagship and cut through Dust Haven's atmosphere in tight formation, leaving white scars across the bruised sky. Each one carried a squad of soldiers in armor that looked less like metal and more like frozen smoke, shifting and rippling as they moved. Their weapons hummed at frequencies that made Arlo's teeth ache even from 2 kilometers away. "Here they come," Brannick said from behind the signal jammer. His hands were steady. His voice was not. Duna was crouched behind a wall of stacked cargo containers near the spaceport entrance. Riv was beside her, clutching a pulse pistol that was older than he was. The retired freight pilots sat in their grounded ships with engines hot, ready to move the heavy hulls as barriers on Arlo's signal. Nobody tries to be a hero, Arlo said over the comm channel. We just need to slow them down. Give me time to finish what I started. The first dropship landed 300 meters from the perimeter. Council soldiers poured out in perfect formation. They moved fast, smooth, and silent. Duna hit the trigger. The buried fuel tanks along the perimeter erupted in a chain of fire and dust. The explosions weren't powerful enough to destroy the advanced armor, but the shockwave scattered the formation and threw sand 100 meters into the air, blinding their sensors. Brannick's jammers kicked in at the same moment, flooding every communication frequency with garbage noise. The council soldiers stumbled, regrouped, stumbled again. Did I T-bought 4 minutes. Inside the ship, Arlo worked. The vessel had transformed since the core ignited. Systems were coming online that he hadn't even known existed. Panels that had been dead and dark now glowed with warm light. The strands of energy he had spent days repairing were pulsing in rhythm, like a heartbeat that had been silent for millennia and was now learning to beat again. But the ship was not complete. The core was alive, but the navigation system, the thing CN needed to actually use the vessel at full power, required one more step. Something deep in the center of the ship that Arlo couldn't reach with his hands. CN stood beside him in the cockpit. Her silver skin was luminous now, lit from within by the same energy that ran through the ship. She was connected to it. She always had been. The ship was an extension of her the way Arlo's tools were an extension of his hands. I can feel the network, she said. Her eyes were closed. Every jump gate, every trade corridor, every beacon, they're all there waiting. But the connection is fragile. One more break and it will collapse. Then tell me what to fix, Arlo said. You cannot fix this. Not with your hands. The core accepted you, but the network is too vast. It would burn through your mind like fire through paper. Outside, the battle was getting worse. The council soldiers had adapted to the traps and were pushing through the spaceport perimeter. Arlo heard Brannick shouting coordinates. He heard Duna trigger a second round of explosives. He heard Riv's pulse pistol firing in short, scared bursts. There has to be a way, Arlo said. There is. CN opened her eyes. I can activate the full network from here. I can use the ship to send a pulse through every gate, every corridor, every station in the galaxy. I can lock the Pale Council out permanently. But it requires all of my focus, and the moment I begin, I cannot defend a ship. I'll defend it. With what? Arlo picked up the comm unit. Brannick, pull everyone back to Pad 7. We're making a last stand at the ship. Brannick didn't argue. Within minutes, the defenders had fallen back to the landing pad. Duna set her remaining charges at the approach routes. The freight pilots angled their ships into a crude wall. Riv, breathing hard and wide-eyed, took position beside Arlo. CN stepped into the center of the ship. The vessel responded. The hull rippled and reshaped itself, unfolding outward like a flower opening. What had been a battered craft was now something else entirely. The curves expanded, the surfaces multiplied, and structures extended from the core like branches from a great tree. The ship was revealing its true form, a command nexus, a living heart of the cosmic infrastructure. Every jump gate in the galaxy pulsed once. The effect was felt on 10,000 worlds. Lights flickered on space stations. Navigation systems recalibrated. Ships in transit felt a gentle tremor pass through their hulls. The universe itself recognized that the architect's vessel was whole again, that on the ground, the council soldiers froze. Their commanders screamed orders through the jammed frequencies. They knew what was happening. They had spent centuries trying to prevent exactly this. They charged that Duna's final charges erupted across the approach path. Brannick's jammers screamed static. The freight pilots gunned their engines, lurching their heavy ships forward to block the gaps. Riv fired until his pistol overheated, then threw it and picked up a piece of rebar. Arlo stood at the ship's hatchway. He had no weapon. He had a wrench in one hand and a communicator in the other. Behind him, CN floated at the center of the nexus, surrounded by light, her hands spread wide, reaching out through the network to touch every corner of the cosmos. A council soldier broke through the line and rushed toward the hatch. Arlo stepped forward and swung the wrench. IT connected. The soldier went down. Point two more came. Brannick tackled one. Duna dropped the other with a well-thrown piece of debris. They held. Minute by minute, breath by breath, they held. Inside the ship, CN whispered, "Almost." And Arlo, standing in the doorway of a ship that contained the universe, bleeding from a cut on his forehead, holding a wrench like it was the most important tool ever made, said quietly, "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." CN asked him one question before she began. What was the cosmos supposed to be? She asked it not because she had forgotten, but because she needed to hear someone else say it. 10,000 years alone will make you doubt your own purpose. 10,000 years of running, of hiding, of watching civilizations rise and fall while you maintain the invisible roads between them will make you wonder if any of it was worth building in the first place. Arlo didn't hesitate. Connected, he said. It was supposed to keep everyone connected. CN closed her eyes. A tear ran down her silver cheek, leaving a trail of faint light. Then she reached out through the nexus and touched the cosmos. Arlo felt it happen. Not saw, not heard, felt. A vibration that started in his chest and spread outward through his body, through the ship, through the ground beneath the landing pad, through the red dust of Dust Haven, through the planet itself, and out into the dark between the stars. It was the feeling of a billion doors opening at the same time, of walls coming down, of distance becoming meaningless. CN didn't shut the network down. She didn't close the gates or strand the Pale Council's fleet. She did the opposite. She opened everything. Every jump gate in the galaxy surged to full power. Trade corridors that had been narrowed by political blockades widened. Routes that had been locked by wealthy systems became free. Navigation beacons that had been dark for centuries flickered back to life, showing pathways that no living species remembered existed, and woven into every signal, encoded in the architecture itself, was a message. Not words, something deeper. A principle written into the bones of the network. This belongs to everyone. No single power can claim it. No council, no empire, no fleet can shut down. The cosmos is connected, and it will stay connected. The Pale Council's flagship tried to override the signal. Their engineers worked frantically, throwing everything they had at the network, trying to seize control of even one gate, one corridor, one beacon. They failed. The network didn't just reject them. It redirected them. The energy that had been powering their weapons was pulled away, siphoned through the gates, and sent outward to every station and colony and world that needed it. Power grids on struggling outposts surged back to life. Medical stations that had been running on emergency reserves for months suddenly had full power. Communication arrays on isolated worlds reconnected to the galactic network for the first time in years. The Pale Council's fleet went dark. Not destroyed, not damaged, simply powerless. Their ships hung in orbit above Dust Haven like dead fish in still water that on the ground. The Council soldiers stopped fighting. Their armor locked up. Their weapons went cold. They stood in the red dust, confused and helpless, as the people of Dust Haven slowly lowered their improvised weapons and stared at the sky. Brannick was the first to laugh. It started as a wheeze and became a full, loud, ridiculous sound that echoed across the ruined spaceport. Duna sat down hard in the sand and put her face in her hands. Riv dropped his piece of rebar and didn't pick it up. The Pale Council's fleet left. One by one, their ships powered up on minimal reserves, just enough to limp to the nearest gate, and disappeared into hyperspace. They would survive. They would regroup somewhere. But they would never control the network. That door was closed forever. Inside the ship, Sin collapsed. Arlo caught her before she hit the floor. She weighed almost nothing. Her silver skin was dim, her violet eyes barely open. She had poured everything she had into the network, And what was left was a woman who looked more tired than anyone Arlo had ever seen. He carried her outside and set her down gently on a cargo crate. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky in deep orange and gold. The ruined spaceport looked almost beautiful in the dying light. "Did it work?" she asked. "It worked. Is everyone safe?" Arlo looked around. Brannick was helping Duna to her feet. Riv was sitting against a wall, staring at nothing, probably rethinking his career choices. The colonists were emerging from their shelters, blinking at a sky that was suddenly empty of threats. "Everyone's safe," he said. Cien was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I would like you to come with me." "Where?" "Everywhere. The network is alive again, but it needs maintaining. Gates need checking. Corridors need tuning. Beacons need repair." She almost smiled. "I could use a mechanic." Arlo looked at his repair shop. The roof had a new hole from the battle. The sign was hanging by one bolt. His tools were scattered across 3 landing pads. It was a mess that he looked at Brannick, who was already grinning. "Go, you idiot," Brannick said. "I'll watch the shop. You can barely fix a toaster. Then you'd better come back regularly to make sure I haven't burned the place down." Arlo turned back to Cien. "One condition." "Name it." "We come back to Dusthaven. I don't care how big the cosmos is." A mechanic doesn't abandon his shop. Cien smiled. It was the first real smile he had seen from her, and it lit up her face like dawn breaking over the desert. "Deal," she said. The ship lifted off from Pad 7 at sunset. It rose slowly, gracefully, shedding red dust as it climbed. From the ground, Brannick watched it shrink into the sky and shook his head. "That man fixed the entire universe with a wrench and a good attitude," he muttered. "Unbelievable." Inside the ship, Arlo was already poking at a section of hull that was making a weird noise. Cien watched him from the pilot's seat, her violet eyes warm. "You know," she said, "in 10,000 years of building the cosmos, I never once thought to simply ask it how it felt." Arlo pressed his ear against the hull and listened. "That's your first mistake. Machines always tell you what's wrong. You just have to care enough to hear it." The cosmos hummed around them, vast and alive and finally whole. And for the first time in 10,000 years, it sounded content.